This is Karen with NewClevelandRadio.net, and it is time for Grief BeLIEF. And to our panel, we have Kristy, we have Allison, we have Carol, and Candace will be joining us shortly. But today, when I was posting something about the podcast, I realized this is number 5, and we've been getting a lot of traction from it. So I am so grateful to all of you for joining me on this journey because, as you personally know, we all experience grief. We experience it differently and at many different times in our life. And if we're just reaching one person for each podcast, that to me means that we're doing the work that we need to do. So today's moderator is Kristy Anderson. And from what I understand, Kristy has a list of questions that she's going to be throwing out to all of us. And I'm really excited to see where we take this. So Kristy, welcome.
Well, thank you. So it's exciting. This is our 5th, did you say? This is our 5th, right?
Yes. Yep.
Well, my first time ever on a podcast was our very first one. And in light of being a grief recovery method specialist, one of the things we talk about is how you cannot become emotionally complete unless you are 100% honest. So in light of that, I'm going to be 100% emotionally honest and tell you I am nervous to run this. So just being honest here. But I'm excited too. So I'm excited to be here with you all. I'm excited to learn from you all. I'm excited to hear what your answers are to these questions. And I'm excited that we are helping some people out there. And I know I've had people reach out to me. I have a question actually from somebody that we're going to throw out there tonight, and hopefully that will help them too. So my goal kind of for tonight is to, first of all, kind of talk about the holidays and how that went, and then to talk about the new year and what that's going to look like. So kind of 2 parts. And then at the end, I have something else that I might like to share if we have time. If not, I'll save it for another time. So first of all, what I wanted to ask everybody was, how did it go? How, we're through the holidays. How did each one of you make it through the holidays? And did you have a plan for those difficult times that might come up that you maybe thought ahead about? Did you have a plan for those? And did you adjust your plans to make space for your griefy or grieving heart? So I'll share, but I want to hear from you guys first.
We didn't have much of a plan. We our favorite thing to do is random. So our eating pattern, we don't eat 3 meals, we graze. Well, we'd like a little bit of this or a little bit of that. And our whole holidays were like that. What do we feel like doing right now? So I guess the plan was in the moment, if there was a plan.
That's really cool. I love that. So did you have a point at which you felt like you needed to maybe make some space for some grief? Did you have that happen?
There's always some of that. I mean, I have a lot of anniversary things that happen around this time. My husband died September 10th. It would have been our 20th wedding anniversary, October 5th. Thanksgiving, Christmas. His birthday was the 21st of December. So on those days, it's close to 7 years since I lost my husband now. And so on those days, it's like a sharp stab. And then all the feelings come flying out of that feeling of this, oh. And then as long as I don't resist them, they come and they fly through me like a tornado, and then they go.
I love
but it does feel like being cut to the heart
Yeah.
in moments.
What about you, Carol?
Without a doubt, you feel slammed, and a lot of times you don't even realize that that's the day or the moment that it hits you. It's really interesting. And I'm almost 13 years into this. And so, yes, you learn how to cope, and you learn how to live again, and you learn how to grow again, and you learn that you thought you had a partner to do all this with, and that you really only have yourself to count on to make your life move forward. That's the hardest part, I think, in grieving, is learning that, realizing that people aren't reaching out to you because they go back to their own lives and they think that you've just gotten on with your life. And there you are, and you're still in this state of shock. And so it's taking a while for you to walk through this and to thaw and to start living again. And like I said, I'm 13 years into it. I'm still finding out who I am as an individual without my partner. And I am in a relationship. So you talk about, how did the holidays go? Well, very interesting. We had great plans. He was going to come here, spend New Year's Eve here. We were going to go dancing and meet up with other people. And guess what? Not only was the weather awful and all the flights got canceled, but he ended up getting COVID. So then I was going to go there, and we were going to have a late New Year's Eve celebration after he tested negative. And even though we weren't with each other, I ended up getting COVID.
Mhm.
So New Year's Eve was spent with a couple of my neighbors, and I ended up cooking for my neighbors, making dinner here and running food down to the neighbors down the hall. Ended up watching the football game that was a nail biter, and being in Ohio, and Ohio State was playing. It was a tearjerker up to the very last moment. So it was interesting. All my plans had to be modified, and I was fine with it. Went with the flow and had a good time cooking and entertaining. But it was one that even Plan B didn't work. Plan C didn't work. So it was really just whoa. And you realize that you can rise to the occasion. It ended up being fun. We played games. We had a good time. It was just the ladies, but very different than what I had expected. And there's always that moment in time where and I know I've said this on another podcast of ours, that I do set a timer. So it goes off. So I take that moment in time just to think and reflect, and to thank Ron for everything that we had, and to ask for his continued guidance in helping me continue on. And so I did take my moment during New Year's Eve to reflect on him and feel his warmth. And I love doing that. I absolutely love doing that.
That's beautiful. I love that. I don't know that I recall you saying that, but that is beautiful. I love that. That's
I do
something
it every Friday night. Every Friday night I have my alarm set for 6:30. And I do reflect on him and everyone else that I've lost in my life, and just take that time, no matter where I am. Sometimes it's just, a second, you close your eyes, or sometimes it's a 20-minute thought. But then on special occasions, I'll do the same thing, because he will always be a part of me.
Yeah.
And I cherish that.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, one other thing, I am primary caregiver for my mother-in-law. So she lost a son, her only son. And so she and I grieve together in different ways over the holidays. So it's complicated. I'm in a relationship. I've been with a man for 4 years, and I grieve my husband, and she grieves her son. And we are together and separate in it. So it's not simple. And I go from my home with my boyfriend to my mother-in-law's home, where there are pictures of me and my husband everywhere. And,
Do you share stories with your mother-in-law, the pictures that are all around you talk about what you were doing in each one of those pictures and what memories you have from those moments in time?
Actually, today I went and saw her, and we were talking about, oh, well, where was this one taken? And where was that one taken? And what was happening in that moment. And so we were actually doing that today.
Yeah, I love
And how
that.
does your boyfriend feel when he's there in the midst of all this? I mean, obviously, he knew about your husband when he met you, but it's got to be difficult for him in his own way.
Yeah, I mean, I was a hot mess when he met me, and it would be, in some ways, it would be easier for him if I didn't have this care of my mother-in-law and the 546 pieces of my husband's work in our apartment. But he, you know, he weathers it, and it's uncomfortable. You know, my husband had a standing easel that was over 100 years old that I was attached to myself for many, many reasons, and I sold it. And I was literally weeping in my lobby. And that's hard because he's in my life. My husband was in. There's nothing simple about any of it.
Right.
And talking to my mother-in-law about she said, I can't call him boyfriend, my man friend. You know, and having her understand that I grieve my husband and I treasure what I have. And they're not opposed to each other.
Well, you wouldn't have what you have today if your husband were still alive. So
Yep.
you are living a separate and joyous life with holding on to the cherished memories of your husband.
Yes, and you know, in any marriage, there are the things that are absolutely wonderful and the things that are really tough. And my marriage was no exception. It was not all rainbows and roses.
No relationship is.
We had really hard times as well. And the thing that's really dangerous is pretending that that's not true. Creating this little fantasy life. And so one of the things that happened after my husband died was I really took a good hard look at my marriage and what I adored about it and what I would never do again. And in my relationship, it's that, but it's the growing up and through that makes me who I am now. And I wouldn't trade it.
Beautiful.
And in
Wow.
fact, you can't.
Mm-mm.
Oh, thank you for sharing. Candace, I don't know if you were on. So the question, and we've kind of gone all over the place, which is great. I love when that happens. But the original question was, how did you make it through the holidays? And did you have a plan? And were you able to adjust your plans to make space for your grieving heart? So that's kind of where we are.
Yeah, my grieving doesn't necessarily correlate with holidays. You know, we were never entirely sentimental about the holidays and so on. It's other things, you know, it's a snippet of a song, it's a scent that occurs and so on. And I came upon this quote again that encapsulates everything for me. I've seen it before, I saved it, but for whatever reason, it popped up again. And it's by Robert Anderson, and it said, "Death ends a life, but it does not end a relationship, which struggles on in the survivor's mind towards some resolution which it may never find." And I don't take that as a bleak comment. It's just a factual thing. And, you know, ever going back to college, I tended to spend at least one of the holidays on my own because of the timing of going back and forth to my home state. and so on. So I think I was fortunate in some ways. Not, I don't have a big family. I don't have children. So a lot of the things that would otherwise trigger certain things that just don't exist in my life. But when they occur, it didn't happen all at once. And in the beginning, I really was not, I was running out of cope a lot in those early months, certainly in somewhat years. But, you just keep, as Allison said, you just keep growing up and through, you just keep going, as if we really have a choice otherwise.
Right. Yeah. So Karen, did you want to answer too?
Well, strangely, it wasn't so much about grief for me. It was more about, sort of excited. My son was coming home. We had all these plans. And he got sick and he passed it on to the two of us. So all of us were sick. We spent a lot of time in separate rooms. But what I found myself thinking is something that all of you have talked about, and that is we have to accept where we are right now. And I realized that I was sick. I didn't want to get any sicker being near my son because he was running a fever. And so I kept saying to myself, I'm okay where I am right now. We'll be together. It may not be this vacation where he's home. And yeah, that stinks, but I can do it. And it had me reflect on losses in my family as well, that, it's not easy to get through these things, but you have to go to your inner strength, and we all have it somewhere. And I think that's where sometimes friends and families don't give us the chance to get those feelings. In fact, my one brother called me and he said, "Oh, aren't you lucky that you're all sick? You don't have to cook." And I wanted to scream at him. It's like, no, but I am lucky that I'm getting through this and they're both getting through it too. And that's where people have to sometimes, think about what they're going to say before it comes out of their mouth.
Yeah. Everybody, I think everybody has talked about the one question that I got from somebody that they wanted us to talk about. We've already talked about it, but it was, how did you handle or how did you deal with any disappointments that might have come up during the holidays? And I love what you just said, Karen, about we have to accept where we are. Because like Candace said, what other choice do you have? I mean, you can fight it, and you're not going to get anywhere with that. So you do.
And that just adds to the pain.
Right. It
Exactly.
does a lot. It adds a lot to the pain and exhaustion. And, we spend a lot of emotional energy trying to think that we have control over things, and we just don't. I mean, my husband always says we have influence sometimes and never control. And that's, we don't even always have influence. Sometimes we do.
I was having a really interesting conversation with one of my clients today, in that she now has gone through a year and a half and realizing the first time she said, I'm not feeling so scattered and so afraid, and could totally relate to that. The anxiety, the initial anxiety from the trauma that you experience from the loss is so monumental that you don't realize that it is taking over your whole life, and everything is exacerbated by it. Everything is, it's not just a little hurt, it's a tremendous hurt. It's not just a little disappointment, it's a tremendous disappointment. But as the time goes on and that anxiety starts to wane a little bit, and I do think that falls in line with the body thawing, the brain thawing, coming into your being again, you're able to start functioning again. And so when we're talking about how did we handle the holidays, all of us are years into it now, some more than others, but we have learned how to cope on a much deeper level than we had initially. And that anxiety isn't ruling everything in our life.
Yeah.
Yeah, and if I could tag on to that, what I learned, very abruptly and harshly was my standard coping mechanisms, which is just to work harder and longer. I mean, that was always my go-to, sublimating uncomfortable feelings, but that just made things worse. It failed me, I guess, in a way. And so, to be prepared that the standard ways of stuffing our feelings and not dealing with them is the path to probably a longer, harder journey.
Yes, I think
Stuffing
that
it in the closet, and all of a sudden you open the closet door one day and it just all comes pouring out. And it's the
Right,
same
right.
thing with you're suppressing your feelings, and you keep suppressing, and all of a sudden the floodgates just open.
Yeah.
And it's that much deeper and that much harder to get out of it.
right. I was just talking with someone recently, and we were kind of discussing this whole idea and how do you handle this when it's also fresh and new? And I think it's important to remember that I think Allison, you even brought this up. You emotions are going to come and they're going to go. So if you can just, I love Candace uses the word surf. If you can just surf those emotions, just go with them. You're not, if you allow them to come and go through you, another one will come. So you're not going to be stuck in that same emotion over and over again. I think we're afraid we're going to be stuck there forever. And you're not. Just allow it to happen. So you're not stuffing and not trying to control the grief. It doesn't work. It just doesn't work. It might in the short term, but long term, you're creating a really big problem. So if you can just surf those.
It doesn't do us a favor. They do it a disservice because they don't understand. Somebody will, just like when you say hi to someone, how you doing? You keep on walking. They don't really want to know how you're doing. When you're grieving and somebody says to you, how are you doing? And if you're honest with them, so many go, whoa, 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 or you can see that they're very nervous about it, or don't you think you should be beyond that by now? Shouldn't you be doing that? So again, it comes back to that lack of education in our society. And how do we educate them one-on-one? How do you continue, as you said, be 100% honest? You're not going to cope, learn how to cope and heal unless you're 100% honest. And yet we live in a society that really doesn't give us the freedom to be 100% honest. We have to give ourselves that permission. And when you are immersed in the grieving, you get rejected by somebody, or somebody says, well, I know exactly what you're saying. And then they say something very mundane, or don't you think you should be beyond it? Then you start questioning yourself. I have so many clients that have said, but I should be further along. I should be further along. No, you shouldn't be. No, this is all individual. There is no time frame on this, and there is no cookie cutter, and there is no step 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 that is defined by time. So trying to explain this to clients and helping guide them is the best thing that we can do, and then hope that they can go out and that our listeners hear this and realize that it's not only the grieving that's going on, but it's how society accepts that grieving and incorporates it into their lives, knowing full well, we know full well, chances are they have a 50-50 chance of going through exactly what we're going through.
Yeah.
If not higher.
My
ahead.
grieving, isn't about someone who has died or who is dying. And what I found was when my son left, I had to close his bedroom door. Now, when I'm sitting in my office with the door open, I can see that door. And it was giving me chills. So I ended up closing my office door. And I wrote about it, and I had somebody who said to me, Karen, there's no reason to grieve. Your son just moved out of town. And I said, well, that's your choice. not to grieve. But my son is never going to move back home again, which is really a good thing. He's an adult. But right now, it is painful. And I said, until I can get over this hump, his door has to stay closed. Now, last night was the first time I've been in his room since he left. So it's almost 2.5 weeks. He finally decided that a bunch of stuff they left behind he wanted. And we were doing a FaceTime call. And I had no problem going in the room. And I know what the reason is. He calls me at least once a day. And I feel like he's here or he's close by. And that was the thing that I really was grieving in the beginning. You know, am I going to lose that? Because oftentimes when our kids move away, they want their independence and we may not hear from them.
It is a loss. It is a definite loss when they go off to college. They don't realize what a loss it is to the parents. They're off having a great time, and we're grieving that. There are different levels, different degrees, I would say. But it is a form of grief. I think we talked about it in one of our earlier podcasts, even a child losing their lovey. That is so meaningful to them and so impactful. I think I shared with you when my son was little and he lost the balloon. And he said, that may not have been important to you, Mom, but it was important to me. And I'm going, whoa, this kid is what, 3-4 years old? And he can already express himself so well. But he was absolutely right. He was grieving the loss of that balloon.
Yeah.
So no,
I
you're
think it
absolutely
underscores the idea that, you know, we can try to educate other people and so on, but we're still going to run into people that, you know, maybe we'll give them a little bit of grace and say they're well-intentioned, but they just say unfortunate things. And, you know, we coined a phrase in our office called an unfortunate communication style, but, you know, we can be thinking of them in those terms and not have it be a judgment on us. I mean, the influence, I love that phrase that you shared, Kristy, about your husband. The influence we have is to say, yeah, you know, that's really a tone deaf thing. Maybe that's being judgmental back, but to be able to recognize that it's an awkward moment. They don't know what to say. They don't know any better. And, but we don't have to receive it as a commentary on whether we're doing grief right or not.
I just hold up my hand and say there are no words. There are no words.
Yeah, exactly. I love that.
Yeah, there's
But sadly, not everybody does.
Right. Right.
there's an expression that I actually despise, but there is a truth to it. People say you're in your new normal. Anyone else heard that? Your new normal. And the fact of the matter is that there is a truth to it, except that the new normal is not static. The new normal is, where are you in this moment in your life? And then 10 minutes later, a year later, a week later, a month later, where are you in this moment?
And there's nothing normal about any of it.
And yes, but it's a willingness to take a look right now. Where are you? Because the thing that's weird about grief is that you're going along and you're basically okay, and then you go right down the sinkhole and lose it. Like, seriously, completely lose it. And there may be a reason, or there may be a reason that's only intelligible to you, or it may be a day that you forgot was one of those days. And then you can come out of the sinkhole and keep going along.
It's an absolute roller coaster ride. And it's a new journey. You never know when you're going to get blindsided.
But being able to, like, freeze frame, okay, and take a look. Where am I now? What's going on now? You know, do I need to cry? Do I need to take a walk? Do I need to, and really check in with your mind, check in with your body. what's going on, not as I'm doing the right thing, I'm doing the wrong thing. If someone says you should or you must, run. You should do this, you must do this. You ought to be further along. You're going too fast, you're going too slow.
Yeah, something you said, actually, so much of what you have said, I'm going to talk about later, but I want to talk about later. But I love, no. So I have found that when I get to those places where I'm suddenly like just engulfed in grief again, it's hard for me to remember that I will come back out of that again. So that's why I wanted to definitely talk about that, to remind people that when you are there, think of it. The grief recovery method uses this picture, and I love it. Imagine that you're at an aquarium with a huge aquarium taken in front of you. And there are these cute little yellow fish that come up, and just a school of them, and they're so cute. And you're looking at them and like, oh, they're adorable. And then all of a sudden, like 3 big shark come swimming by, and you're like, whoa, that was intense. And then, some, I don't know, another group of fish come by that are just really interesting looking. And you're like, oh, look at those. Those are interesting. So if you can think about our emotions, I mean, just in general, this is good, but especially in grief, that, they're going to be like that. They're going to ebb and flow. And to remember that when you get to that point where you're looking at those sharks and you're like stuck in fear and overwhelmed and anxious, that those sharks are going to swim by and you're going to see something different and you're going to feel something different. You're not going to be stuck there. So I think it's really important if we can think about that and know that ahead of time, so that when you do get in that place and you think, I'm never coming out of this, you can remember, oh, wait, the fish tank. Yes, I will come out of this again.
Yeah, there was a cartoon that I loved as my husband was dying, actually, and after he died. And it was Charlie Brown and Snoopy sitting on a dock looking out. And Charlie Brown says, someday we will all die. And Snoopy says, but not today. And for some reason, I found that it sounds really dark, but I found it very comforting.
Yeah.
Also going to go back to a little bit about what Kristy was saying about the aquarium. And I love that cartoon. I've used it in the past too. It is, but not today. But writing has helped me through some of those emotional sidetracks. When I all of a sudden have an emotional moment, I will try and take a moment to write. What was I doing when that hit? And what was I thinking? And how am I feeling? And write my way out of it. I find that very cathartic in moving forward and trying to understand, what was that moment? Was it a song I heard in the background? Was it a pebble that just came? Or did I feel that arm, that embrace that made me think of him? Or was it I realized what day it was, or whatever? But what was it that triggered that emotion? How did I feel? And how did I feel after I cried? And then how did I move forward?
Yeah, and I was able to figure out that Sunday late afternoon going into the evening, particularly in the winter months when people tend to cocoon, we would come home and we would, when my husband was alive, and we would, we had to make a nice meal for the evening and sit by the fire, and so we had little rituals, and that turned out to be the hardest time for me to navigate in the early time frame. And so I just arranged to do my grocery shopping during that time. I could dive into it from time to time, but it tended to not serve me. And if I were going to have a tendency to kind of go into a downward spiral and stay spiraling down, it would be doing something like that. So I just made arrangements to be occupied with something else, and I could still be thinking about, okay, I'm going to go home and make a meal, and but not all of those triggers that would tend to overwhelm me in that early period. And it wasn't avoidance. It was just, I thought, it was a way to better be able to surf things in a more digestible way, is how I perceived it.
You know, it's interesting that you did that, because when my mother passed away, I had been used to, when I went to the grocery store, that was the best time for me to call her, because that meant I had maybe 15, 20 minutes. And at the end of it, I could say, no, I'm here at the store. But the first time I went grocery shopping after she died, I called her, and obviously the phone was disconnected. And I couldn't go grocery shopping. I turned around and came home. And that happened a couple of times. And then my brother suggested to me, well, why don't you call me when you go grocery shopping? And I thought it was a great idea, but then I decided not to, because I did not want to connect grocery shopping with grief. And so I finally just made up my mind to grocery shop at a different time of the day. And in my mind, there was nobody to call at that time, and I could get through it. But you know, we create patterns, and then when that person is not around to be part of that pattern, it's difficult.
Yeah,
And modifying our routines is not always the easiest thing to do. And that's what we're doing. We're modifying our routines. We're becoming who we are now, not who we were.
I just remembered something as you were talking. I actually had the same exact experience when I used to take ballet as an adult. I decided to try something different. And so I was taking ballet, and in that time frame, my mom died. And I would always call my mom on my way home from ballet. And so when she was gone, I would cry on my way home. So I did that. I started calling my sister on my way home from ballet, and that helped me to do that. But as you were talking about this, I realized today I was at Petiti's, shopping at Petiti's, and I started feeling super anxious. And I realized every time I'm in here, I'm anxious. And then I remembered it's because after my mom died, my sister and I went to Petiti's. It was just days after she had died. We were looking for, I think, stuff for her memorial service. And I was like, oh my gosh, that's why every time I come in here, I feel this like this anxiety. Like even just talking about it, my hands start to get sweaty. But I didn't put that together until today, that's why every time I go into Petiti's, I get this like, and today I was like, why am I so nervous that I'm just in Petiti's, and this happens all the time. And I just connected it all today. So I'm wondering if now, knowing what it is, if I'll be able to go in there and not, at least I know what it is, and then it won't affect me as much. It'll be interesting to see.
Yeah, that naming it to tame it concept, you know, being able to recognize the connection, and sometimes just recognizing it can create a big shift.
Right.
That clarity. Yeah. I had a brother who died when I was 25 and he was 23. And the last time I saw him alive was after my cousin's funeral. And I didn't say goodbye at the airport. And then the next time I saw him was literally in a coffin. And after that, every time I didn't say goodbye, I lost it at the airport. Hysterical, crying, screaming, whatever, because I had hooked together. If you don't say goodbye, they're dead next time you see them. So the way that we connect things up, especially in grief, is not necessarily logical. But if you can unhook, what is it that latched on to something in that experience to this other experience, it's possible to unravel it and dismiss the charge, release the charge.
How long did it take you to realize that you could give yourself permission to do that?
Took a couple of years of losing it in airports.
Yeah, that anxiety, that panic.
Not gonna lie, because it was so traumatic to not have said goodbye, I love you, even though he knew I loved him. There wasn't a question of that. But I just got it hooked up. And
who could know that it was going to be a permanent goodbye?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so then I was like, oh my gosh, if I don't say goodbye, they're going to die. Because the heart isn't logical.
Right. Right.
The heart just latches the emotion. And then the logic gets pulled along with the heart's logic. And we have these experiences like you described, Kristy, and like I described.
Well, if you guys are okay, I would like to kind of shift to, is there anything else anyone wanted to say on this though? I don't want to. Okay. So I wanted to shift a little bit and kind of think about the new year and find out how everybody's feeling now that we're starting a new year. And if you have any plans for the future, how does the new year affect you? Does it, in light of your losses, in light of any grief you may be experiencing, does the new year bring you peace, hope, anxiety? What other emotions? How is that for you?
Well, who's going to go first?
I will. So
Okay.
if you ask me this after Hutch died in the early years, and I'm going to, declare that it easily took me 5 years to kind of stop whatever it was I was doing. I would not have felt hope. I would have been coping. I would have been going through the motions and so on, but there was a deadness to it. Not completely bleak. I certainly had my moments of fun and so on, but there was still a pall on everything. But I'm, at a point where like the old me is kind of resurfacing again, which is, for me, the New Year's are always something like going back to school. I always love that time of year, something new to learn, something new to explore, kind of a deal. So I guess if I had a message for other grievers, it would be, you might have to slog through some time where it does seem bleak, kind of what we were talking about in the first segment. But, just have faith and keep plugging along. And, what's that? The sun will come out tomorrow, that from Annie or whatever.
Yep.
That, yeah.
Is that how it is for most of you? I'm the opposite. Like the new year is really hard for me. So I'm interested to hear if there's anybody else who's similar or if it's hopeful for you.
In a podcast I did this afternoon, we sort of talked about, why do so many people believe that because it's now January 1st, everything's going to be better? And I said, I look at it one day at a time. And January 1st this year, I'm not going to say it was better. I'm not going to say it was bad. It was just a day. And I'm learning how to accept that. Because, we all go through recovery differently. And you can think that you're recovered from something that really has pained you. And a TV program comes on, or you see something on the computer and it triggers you. And so I don't look at any one day as being the day that, hey, things are going to change. Things are going to change every time I take a step.
Yeah, and let me just be clear, I didn't feel that way in the beginning, I'm going to call it. I don't know what that represents actually in the beginning, because it's not a time bound thing. But to normalize it for other people, whatever it is, we'll have something that evolves into something else later. It's not, what we were talking about earlier, it's not permanent. So.
I find the most interesting is that, and I totally agree with you, Candace, in the beginning, I don't even know how I was taking one step, one breath at a time.
Right, right.
Everything was just so painful. Living was painful.
Mhm.
Getting up in the morning was everything was painful. But, and again, in talking to some of my clients as they're going through this too, that you think that you have a partner for life, and your life has now evolved with that partnership. So part of you is missing, part of you is gone. And how do you pick up the pieces and carry on now without that partnership? And there is that loss and that fear, maybe even resentment. And it takes a while to realize that you can go forward, but you aren't in a partnership. And so how do you redefine yourself? And part of coping with grieving is learning how to redefine yourself and grow and take that step and breathe and become the best person you can be. But it's not the path you thought you were going to be on. So it's a whole new journey, whole new territory.
Yeah, it's very mixed, the beginning of the year. My husband left me all these paintings to sustain me, but I haven't been able to let them go until really November, December of last year. So we're coming on 7 years. And so getting back on my feet, getting back to recognizing myself has taken so long, so much longer than I ever anticipated. And I've talked to clients and they're like, okay, well, I'm going to be back in a year and a year. And I'm like, not so fast. So this year in particular, from not being functioning. I mean, I describe myself as a hot mess for at least 2 years and a good bit more. 5 is really kind of what I'm looking at. But this year I'm looking at, okay, I recognize myself again. It's taken me almost 7 years. And I really want to stress, grief, it's got its own timeline. And you're just holding on to the tail of it and riding. And there's not a bloody thing you can do about it.
You're absolutely right.
Yeah. And so this year, one of the things that I talk to my clients about is that you're going along and moving through the spaces and for me, it's trying to make the spaces bigger. So I went to a cocktail party and I started to hit a panic attack in 90 minutes. So I left. This week, I'm going to a business conference. I'm flying for the first time in 3 years. Now I love to fly. My parents had pilot's licenses, a little plane called George. I was flying from when I was a baby. I love to fly. I fly Thursday. I am terrified. And I fly Thursday.
Where is the fear coming from?
My capacity for being around people is smaller than before. I'm going to this conference and I was going to share a place with people, but I don't know how I'm going to be. So I got a place by myself. And so it's required just really feeling into wanting to stretch and caring for myself in the way that I see I need to care for myself.
And kudos to you for taking that step.
Yep. But that's the clear-sighted honesty that you were talking about, Kristy.
We're
Where,
holding us to a huge task.
yep,
Honesty.
Yeah, but the thing that stands out for me, Martha Beck talks about a liminal stage. You know, it's like when you're engaged, you're not married, but you're not single. So you're kind of in between. Some people might call it limbo, and you know, I guess there's lots of different things. But to be able to recognize that that's normal as well. You know, exactly what you were just describing, Allison. That you know, we're venturing out, but there's some trepidation. You're putting some parameters around it just so you have, you know, a safety net, so to speak, in terms of how you manage the surfing. And but just to be able to, that more of the naming to taming concept of, okay, I'm still in that liminal stage. You know, when somebody's pregnant, they're a mom, but they're not a mom. You know, the baby's not here yet, but it's here. And I think grief is a lot like that transition.
and there's nothing wrong with that.
Exactly.
And people say, well, you're going too fast, you're going too slow, you're doing it wrong. This is what it looks like for real.
The difference is, have they actually experienced it? And are they in your shoes? So
Right.
people are wonderful at giving advice. But until they walk the walk and talk the talk and literally are in that other individual's skin, there is no one shoe fits all. There is no one size. There is nothing that you can say unequivocally that this is how you're going to grieve.
Right. And
Other
no
than
loss
we
is
know
the
that's
same.
the pain.
Yeah. Right.
Well, my
Yeah.
mother-in-law and I lost the same person. Our grief is not the same.
No.
Exactly. Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
sure you all deal with families and their grief is not the same. Whether they lost their father or their brother or their husband or whatever, the family, each individual grieves differently too for that person.
Or a job or a business.
Yeah, very true. You know, it's one of the first things we learned in grief recovery was that every single relationship is unique. So every single grieving experience will be unique, and nobody will ever be able to understand what you're going through because they don't have your relationship.
Exactly.
So someone saying to you, oh, I know just how you feel. If that brings up a feeling of like you want to smack them in the face, that's accurate because they don't know and they never will know because they don't have your relationship. They didn't have your relationship. So
They
everyone.
have their relationship
Right.
that they're equating it to.
Exactly.
Or maybe not. They may be just a bystander to us, you know, and
True.
those often are the ones that, again, maybe as well as intentioned as whatever they're saying was meant to be, maybe, you know, not on point, so to speak. Unfortunate, but we can be excellent surfers and just recognize they mean well.
Absolutely. Kristy, at the beginning of the podcast, you mentioned you had something special you wanted to share with us. Do you want to do that now?
Sure. So for Christmas, I asked for something. I don't know if you guys have heard of this, but have you heard of the Death Deck? It's a game. And I had been following these people on Instagram for a while, and I really wanted this game. So I asked for it for Christmas, and one of my daughters got it for me. So now keep in mind, our kids are all in their 20s or teens. So on New Year's Eve, we all got together and with their significant others. And I just said, we're going to play games. I said, guys, I want to play this at least once so that I can see what it's like, because I might want to talk about it on the podcast. So they agreed to play it, and they didn't want to quit playing it. It's really, really cool. They're not paying me to tell anybody about this, but this is what it looks like. It's so cool. And our kids wanted to play. I asked them to play 1 round. We played 3 rounds until somebody had to leave, and then we stopped.
Well, tell us a little bit more about it. What does it involve?
It's a deck of cards that have questions. You can actually play it several different ways. So the way we played it, because we had a rather large group of people, was you just kind of sit in a circle. The deck goes around. The person whose turn it is pulls a card, and there's a question at the top of the card. And then there are 3 options for answers. So the person will read the question to themselves, read the 3 responses, and then they pick which response they would choose for themselves without telling anybody. And once they've done that, then they read the question out loud to everybody, and then we have to go out around the room and guess which answer, A, B, or C, is what they picked. And then you accumulate points, if you get it right. But what I loved about it was it got us talking about things you just don't normally talk about. End of life things, death. Like, I'll read a couple of questions. My religious or spiritual beliefs affect my views on death. And then there are 3 options. Guiding me to live life fully, knowing there's more to come afterward, providing a general sense of an afterlife, but not without questions. My beliefs or lack of don't impact my views on dying. So just question upon question upon question that just got us talking. And talking about things that, I learned stuff about my kids and what they thought that I had no idea. So it's just really, really cool. I strongly suggest it. And it's a safe place where it's a game. And I told everybody, if you pull a card and you're not comfortable with that question, put it away and get a different one. I don't want anyone to be uncomfortable. So it was just really cool. And then there are some deeper questions. Some of them are real kind of, some of them are kind of funny. But then there are other ones that are deeper. And then there are some that are just questions just to discuss. And you can play a game with this too. But these are just a little deeper, these questions are. So there's several different ways to play it. And it's amazing.
What do you think? Would it be interesting for us to do a podcast on the Death Deck? Where the 5 of us literally spend the hour playing the game.
I thought about that. I actually thought exactly that exact thing, but I need to think about it a little bit more and see how we could play it. It's different when you're playing with a group of people well. I need to figure out how we could play it where it's people who don't know each other real well yet. So, and we could just pull questions and talk about them, really, because that's what these are, just questions, and we could just discuss the questions.
Because it could be real interesting. We're all coming from different backgrounds and different thoughts, different theories, so it could be real interesting to do that as a podcast.
Yeah, I think it could be too. Yeah, we'll have to think about doing that. Maybe on my next turn, I'll do it.
Oh no, I was going to do it on mine. No.
And as you talk about this, I think having playing a game that creates a conversation is really important. I know when we put all of our so-called final papers together, when we finally got them delivered, I sat down with Alex and we were going through it, and he just didn't want to hear about it. He's like, no, I don't want to think about you dying, whatever, put those in the corner. And if I have to ever look at them, I will. But since then, he has talked to us, and we've talked about different things, especially since his uncle passed away in December. And there were certain things that happened during that time that we said, how would we have done this differently? And we all came up with something that, in reflection, we were all sort of in agreement. So I think, if you can look at it, I think I'm going to purchase it myself so I can look at it, Kristy. But I think if we can look at it and see how this game can help other people, I think that would be tremendous. And again, none of us are getting any royalties. So,
right.
And there's another game that's similar. It just doesn't deal with necessarily death, but it's just opening up conversations with people, and it's called Unfiltered. So it really digs deeper into questions that you maybe wouldn't share with somebody. And it is an interesting game to play with people that you're not necessarily good friends with.
Mhm.
It opens up another conversation.
Yes, yes.
But that's an awesome.
I was just so
Suggestion.
surprised that my kids, I'm just thinking, 20-year-olds, teens, they're just not going to be into this. And they just wanted to keep going.
Good.
Hmm.
Well, it sounds like we all somehow made it through the holidays. It wasn't like many of us planned. I mean, Carol, when I heard that your plans got all messed up, as sick as I said to Richard, why don't we drive down to Columbus? And he said, oh, and get Carol sick. And I said, okay, we won't do that. But
Thank you for not coming.
yeah, you're welcome. But there is something in all of us that helps us move through life. And we get to choose whether we want to feel good at the end of the day or allow things to keep piling up on us and making us feel miserable. And I think this conversation is helping a lot of people. So for those of you who are out there who are listening, let us know. Each of our panelists are listed in the show notes with their emails, so feel free to write them. And we'll do this again next month. Sound good?
Bye, gang.
That's good.
Bye, everybody.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.